Okay, we're going to go ahead and continue to work on details using charcoal and conte. And so we're going to focus on the eye. You'll notice that I have some base value already done up to the whites of my eye. I even have a little bit inside the eye there as well. That's mostly a mistake because I accidentally forgot to hit record, so I had to erase it. So you can see there's a little bit of residue, but you can totally rework it if you do make a mistake, and I'll show you how you can cover this up. So make sure to bring your value all the way up to the white of your eye. Make sure you have a reference out. I have a reference out on my computer. And so what I'm going to do is start with the whites of the eye. So your eyeball is white. So next to the iris, that's the colored section of your eye, it's pretty white. And then as you move to the corners, it probably is a little bit gray. So I'm going to add a little bit of a gradation scale here so that I make that eyeball look 3D. So I'm going to probably have to add a little bit of the black to the corners of the eye to get that to look a little bit more round. And for your example, you probably can see that your eyeball or your eye is pretty small. So I like to use the blending stump to blend the values on this. And then I like to use one side of it for when the values are pretty dark, and then the other side when the values are pretty light. So since I'm shading and adding some dark, I'm going to actually use the dark end to kind of smudge it into the white. And so if it starts to make it too dark, you can always smudge and like switch the edge and pull the light over. But don't let that light edge go all the way to the dark. If it does get too dark, I like to use a paper towel and then just kind of wipe it gently. If you press too hard, you're going to make this really smooth and it's going to make it streaky. So you want this to stay nice and soft rather than shiny. Same thing with the surface. When you're shading, make sure that you have a nice light touch, because if you press too hard, it's going to press it into the surface and it's going to make it nice and it's going to make it bad and streaky. Okay, so if I look at this, maybe I went a little bit too dark, so I can go ahead and add some more light to this to get more of a gradual transition. Okay, so let's go ahead and start working inside the iris. One of the things I'm going to need to do is preserve my glare. So I'm going to draw in where I see streaks of light so that that stays nice and light for me. And then when I look at the eye, it's darker on the edge. So I'm going to go ahead in here and add some darkness. And I'm going to pull it out as far as I see it. And then the pupil is really dark as well. So I want to make sure that it's centered in my iris and that it's rounded. Okay. And then your iris is like a muscle, and so it has some texture to it. So I'm going to shade it kind of going out, kind of like a sun ray. And for some of you, you have really dark eyes, so you might not see anything lighter. But for others of us, we might actually have to add the white in too. Okay, so you can blend this together. So I'm going to use the dark side again, right, to kind of smudge this so that there's a nice base here. And then I'll go back in and add some texture and some definition to those values. Okay, so darker on the edge, right? Darker on the edge, some fibers kind of coming in. Make it look as round as possible. And then I'm going to go in and try to see where I see some light. Okay, it's looking a little hairy. So I might have to make that a little bit smoother. So I'm softening that up a little bit, and then I'm gonna clean up. Okay, and then I'll go in and put my glares in. So they're nice and bright and white. Okay. So then, once I have that iris in, I'm gonna go ahead and probably have to add some value to the crease here. So you can see I put in the eyelid. You might have to look and see about your bottom eyelid. And then for where the eyelashes are, sometimes there's a little bit of a shadow from your eyelid. So sometimes we have to go in here and kind of darken it up just a little bit, or we can even just line the top lid. Okay, don't line the bottom lid, but line the top lid because that's where a lot of the eyelash is going to be. So you can smudge it in if you need to, just to make that eyelid look a little bit more 3D. So then from here, for my eyebrow, I want to pay really close attention to my reference. So it's going to go kind of straight up, and then it's going to turn direction as it moves. You want to pay attention to how much of your eyebrows you actually see. Like you might have fewer of them in the corner closest to your eye, and then they might get thicker as they start to turn direction, and then they might dissipate again. And the nice thing about these is put less than you think you need. You can always add more, but then if you do too much, sometimes you can erase them away without having to get rid of all of the base, and then you can add them back in. But keep it nice and light. I will often kind of pencil this in, you know, with this. I'll just kind of like lightly place in where I want to put those eyebrows, okay, before I actually do them. So the last thing we have is the eyelashes, and just like the eyebrows, less is more. So you want to be real conscious not to do too much. So pay attention once again to the direction of your eyelid. When you look, or your eyelashes, I should say, when you look at them, you'll see that they're not all going the same direction. So some of them come up over your eye. So notice how this is no longer straight. And so I'm going over my eyelashes, and I'm putting in a few of them, and I'm changing the length of them because sometimes they're coming at you directly in the center, and then you start to see more and more of them in the corner kind of going off to the side. But notice that they're bending, right? They're not straight. And I always put in a few long ones and a few shorter ones in between them, thicker to that or closer to that line, so that your eyelashes look fuller, right? But remember, I didn't put in every last one of them. I'm just kind of indicating some of that basic value. And then for the bottom, keep in mind that they don't touch the bottom lash or the bottom edge of the thickness. So I'm just going to go ahead and go in and put a few in where I see them. Right? And I can always go back in with the pencil if I have like maybe some of highlight that needs to get pulled out for the eyelid, right? So that gives you a little bit of some structure on how to proceed with your eye.